Good morning, everybody. It's good to see, well, one of you definitely again, and some of you from yesterday I saw you again. So I'm pretty sure everybody's quite excited to get started, so I'm not going to be talking too long because today it's about you guys. And also I'm quite sure that, considering that yesterday we had the semifinals and it was a long day, so you might be a bit tired from that, but also you've had like local heats, county heats, regional heats, so everybody, I think one way or another is very happy to just be here and to just sort of wrap up this year's competition. I'd like to start by thanking the Jockey Club and Irina Macedonski, who's a representative, for helping us once again with the venue for the finals and graciously accepting to host us and to host the finals of the competition. Also, I would like to thank our adjudicators for today, Andrea Tănase. Thank you very much. Also, Kendall, Pete with the International British School of Business. I would also like to thank Kendall and IBSB for the lovely trophies that you will be getting at the end. They're quite heavy, so might I warn you from now, so hopefully you have like a big backpack or something because they are quite heavy. And obviously before we get started, congratulations to all of you for making it to the finals of the competition. And I'm sure that any one of you is going to make us proud in London in May this year. And who knows, fingers crossed, hopefully come home with an award. So, as you all know, each and one of you will be delivering your speech, which is about 5 minutes. Andrea, who is going to be our timekeeper, is going to give you a signal at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, 5 minutes, and at 5:30 when you will be stopped. Also, after each speech, there will be questions from the audience, and Irina will very graciously be the chairperson, and she will be taking the questions from the room. There will be about 3 to 4 questions for each participant. Okay. Also, for the first question, for the first speaker, sometimes the first speaker doesn't really get a lot of questions, so it's okay to ask the first speaker questions as well. Okay. So, start warming up for that. Warm up your voice. Also, I would like to thank Editura Niculescu and Fischer. We have some very nice books and goodies prepared for you. And I guess with that, I will wrap up my speech for today. And I will let Irina take on her duty as chairperson, and she will be introducing the first speaker. Best of luck to everybody.
Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be in this place as a host. And I'm happy to welcome you here in this beautiful historical place with a very rich history, very rich activity. It's a very beautiful place in Bucharest. At the end of the event, I will tell you a few things. So I would like to invite Ms. Barascu and Catalina to have the first discourse.
Why is nature a common language? In fact, is that even so? Well, I believe it is. And the reason why I say this is because nature not only speaks to us, but it also helps us speak to each other. First of all, I said nature speaks to us. To understand what I mean, just close your eyes for 1 minute. Go on, close them. Now, picture that tall tree in front of you and a leaf falling down before you. Imagine that fragile feather dancing its way down into your hands and the breathtaking beauty of the image created by the sunset on the lake. These common images help us understand that nature is the one who taught us what beauty truly is, because there is beauty in simplicity. Next, think about the sound that the raindrops make when they hit the ground. Think of the calm you must feel walking through a forest where the wind blows softly. The feeling you have when you walk on sand, when you look at the moon, when you watch the waves crashing on the shore. That's the authentic peace that only nature has to offer. It's her who taught us this solemn, still approachable feeling. We cannot ignore, though, the spiritual side that nature has. When we look around us, we see tremendous pieces of art. The ocean with its great depths, and the mountains with their imposing heights. The distance from the lowest to the highest point is about 20,000 meters. Who could do that? Some people wonder. Who would make so many different kinds of plants, animals, and humans? They think, because even each snowflake is different from one another. Well, nature has a very clear answer for us. God created all this because He would be the only one capable of making something out of nothing. Only He could create and sustain such a diverse complexity. Secondly, I said nature helps us speak to each other. From the simplest to the hardest concepts, we use nature to express ourselves. For example, when we want a child to learn basic words, we just show him the plant, the animal, the natural phenomenon we want him to memorize. But you might say, oh, come on, we have books, or rather phones for that now. Then, let's think about gravity. How can we explain gravity? We can't tell what color, smell, taste, or form it has. So what do? We use nature. So we say, gravity is what happens to a ball when you throw it in the air. We all know it doesn't remain there. It comes back. So that's it. Gravity is the force that makes the ball come back. We had a hard concept, simplified by nature. It's pretty much the same thing with the legend about Newton and the apple. A fruit helped him understand what gravity was. Therefore, we see nature helps us express ourselves so that we can communicate more efficiently. Moving on, I'm sure all of you have seen a painting or a photograph illustrating nature. Both of them express feelings. The colors that a painter chose, what he chose to paint, the style, they all hide a specific message that's meant to be perceived by the viewer. Just as well, the photographer captures something important to him that's meant to send certain feelings to his viewers. Once again, we see nature helps artists express themselves to us. In addition to that, think about literature. Writers want to express themselves, their emotions, their ideas, and they mask them by using elements of nature. As an example, we have the oak in Niculescu Cântecul Vârstelor, called Axis Mundo, the link between the earth and the sky, meaning an evolution in knowledge. Just as well, the Lucifer in Mihai Eminescu's eponymous poetry is the mask of a paragon, the genius who has to live lonely because he knows much more than others. They don't understand him, so they push him away. Once more, we see nature helps us send cryptic messages. In conclusion, nature is our common language, the one written inside us, because nature speaks beauty, peace, spirituality to us, and it also helps us express ourselves to one another. That's its way of enriching our lives.
You have listened to Băiascu Ana Catalina with the discourse The Nature Inside Us. Thank you very much. And who has the first question, please?
Do you think that God made us the protagonists of nature?
Well, it depends what I look at. If I look in the Bible, then the answer is yes. The humans were created to rule over the entire creation. And as long as I agree with the Bible, my answer is yes. The humans are made to not only to control, but also to protect everything that's around them, especially nature.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
So you stated that God is responsible for the existence as the sustaining of everything that happens on earth and nature. But why is God so silent when it comes to the destruction of nature and the exploitation of it?
Well, you see, I think that there is a confusion between God's part and human's part, because we tend to blame God for everything that goes wrong in our world, and we say, oh, look around, there's so much evil. God's responsible, right? Well, the answer is no, because we live in this world. We are bad, we are evil. So when we do bad things happen back to us. So that's it. It's not God who's responsible for what's happening bad in the nature. He's not responsible for us destroying the nature. It's us who are to blame because we are doing the bad things here.
Fischer is Budan Mihail. Discusses a multiple forms of science.
Hello everybody, my name is Mihail Budan and I'm very happy to be here in front of you. Today in my speech, I would like to hit 3 essential points. The first one will be, what does nature truly mean to us and how it can become a common language? The second is called, what language is nature? And for the last part of my speech, I would like to talk about a quote by somebody who really meant something to this world. So let's begin. Nature. The one concept that can be associated with so many things that you don't even know what it certainly is. You want to know why? Well, try to imagine your everyday life without the tall buildings, the loud cars, even without electricity. Yes, you got it. Life as you are just a tiny animal in the humongous Amazonian jungle. What do you have in common with every single human being standing next to you, now that there are no such things as the ones I've just listed? I tell you what, nature. Because this is the greatest gift that humanity has got ever since its beginnings. Do we take advantage of it? Or do we enjoy it the way we should? No. Because we are distracted by the masses to think that nature is nothing more but a parcel of grass, possibly with 2 trees hanging out there. This is wrong. Nature can mean so much more than just that. For instance, nature is not green. Nature is color itself. Nature is everything that surrounds us. When you look at the sky, what do you see? I'll tell you what I see. I see an endless path to something even greater than everything I know by now. We don't have to think about nature as something we already know and find boring. Because, as Lou Holtz, a famous football player and later on in his career coach, said, a bird doesn't sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. A song which can be interpretable. A song that unites a soul. A song sung by every single living creature on earth. You can take it in any way you want, you decide which best fits your mentality. I realized that earlier in my speech I said that nature is everything, which means nature is the same for every one of us. We have this particular thing in common, a bond where no language is required for understanding each other. The second point of my speech is entitled, as I've already said, what language is nature? Well, first we'll have to talk about language itself, which is a strong aspect of culture in general. And which language would be a better example than English? With over 350 million native speakers and many more out of 7.7 billion which as a second language have chosen it, English is by far the most spoken language on earth. Think of it as the one thing that you actually have in common with a stranger you've just met. But what if there was no common language between you and a certain someone? Let's say you have to get somewhere and you're lost. Somebody shows up right next to you and he might be helpful, but unfortunately, he doesn't speak any of the languages that you know. Being desperate because you're getting late, you start to saw the air to make all kinds of gestures, maybe pointing to some tree or rock, hoping that that guy will understand what you have to say. Happily he does, and you're saved. Now I have to ask you, what was the one thing that you actually had in common with that guy who helped you get wherever you wanted? Was it nature? Of course, because you see, nature has its own language, pointing at things, developing a storyline with only your fingertips and what you had around you. That's what actually saved you. This leads to the idea that nature is a language that everyone speaks, a common one. For the last part of my speech, I would like you to pay attention to the following quote. Like music and art, love of nature is a common language that can transcend both political or social boundaries. This is what the famous Jimmy Carter said. This man was not only the President of the United States of America between 1977 and 1981, but he also won the Nobel Prize for Peace. And regarding his quote, nobody could have said it better. There are no boundaries as far as nature goes. It is infinite, and it provides you absolutely everything you need to do absolutely everything you want. You just have to know how to use what you got. Embracing the nature and what it has to offer is the right way to live your life and bond with people. In conclusion, everybody has its own definition for nature, and I really find it the hardest topic to debate, keeping in consideration that people see what they want to see, and usually sharing an opinion is very rare. But I can say that, in terms of language, it is definitely the most beautiful and loved by people of all kinds. Thank you very much for it.
His discourse on multiple code of science. Who has questions, please?
The premise of your speech is that nature is important for people and so on. But if by hypothesis we reach the situation in which humanity is no longer dependent on nature and people do not care about it, can you find some independent and intrinsic value in nature without humanity?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Really, thank you. But I really think that people really need nature in this process of evolving. Because you see, without nature, nothing is possible. It's been here since the beginnings, and it has helped us. So nature is really the main reason why people keep evolving and why people are doing so great. Because they exploit it and take it from the nature. Everything is taken from nature. So I hope the answer satisfies your question. Thank you.
How do you think nature would define herself if she were to speak?
Very interesting question. Well, nature will define herself as beautiful, as resourceful, as very rich, but I think that people tend not to see it because, you see, it continues to provide us and it gives us everything we need. But we don't see the beauty in it. We just take it away from it. So, to conclude your question, I really think that nature will definitely see herself as happy, beautiful, but not taken in serious by us people.
The third speaker, Dogaru Vlad Andrei. Discourse The Sea of Meaning.
Любовь, amor, Liebe, amore, dragoste. All of these words mean the same thing, love. And they sound beautifully, don't they? What if all humans spoke the same language? I assume most of you have asked yourselves this question at some point in your lives, but have you found the answer to it? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vlad Andrei Dogaru, and I'm here today to tell you that in fact, we speak the same language without even realizing it. Stephen Talbot says that fish swim, and their capacity for swimming makes no sense without water. Birds fly, and their entire structure and functioning testify to the sea of air in which they live. And we humans speak. We navigate a sea of meaning. We speak a word, say love, or water, or energy, and by this word we mean something. Of course, we readily acknowledge that the word itself has a meaning of some sort, but we should not forget that this meaning, to the degree we use the word truthfully, also exists in the world. Let's take a very simple and precise example of this. You have decided to go on a trip to the mountains for your holiday. You've been told by many of your friends about a very picturesque landscape found in a specific region of the Alps. It is indeed a place where you completely forget about anything related to the busy city life and you simply lie down on the fresh grass, charmed by its smell. Your friends had told you about the stunning and enchanting views you'd get while choosing to spend your holiday there, yet these things don't speak to you with any grammatical clarity. You recognize the beauty of the wild nature and you are continually drawn to its elements, but you cannot exactly describe what you're feeling. If you cannot verbally explain what is happening to you, is the feeling real anymore? Of course it is. Since nature had existed long before humans invented language, we should easily accept that our linguistic systems based on grammar structures simply pale in front of the limitless universe. That's because meanings and concepts are immaterial. They are not tangible or otherwise sense-perceptible things, which is what I mean by saying they are inner. Many philosophers agree that meanings are expressions of consciousness. And just as we find our speech vitally supplemented by physical gestures of every sort, gestures that are themselves outward bearers of inner meaning, also nature welcomes us with word-like gestures. Unfortunately, we often fail to pay attention. We never learn the language of the world we inhabit, but at the same time we want to learn as many foreign languages as possible. We try to master nature while becoming increasingly deaf to her complex symphony. And sadly, we may be the only species in nature which doesn't understand its tongue. Take, for example, the birds, which sense the moment when they have to migrate to warmer territories, or the ants, which stock food resources during the summer so that they have enough to eat during winter, and the list could go on. All of these are signals sent by nature to its creations, and any signal must be part of some kind of language. This is a way by which nature speaks its voice intimately through the ears which want to listen. When will we humans listen to it? I have a strong belief in this regard. As I stated at the beginning of my speech, I consider that we all speak the same language, the language of nature, yet we are too deaf to hear it and too blind to witness it. As long as hatred and racism towards different groups still exist in today's world, we will never be granted with nature's language. Trees give oxygen equally to everyone, no matter their skin color. Also, mothers who resemble the idea of nature the most among humans give birth in the same way and provide the same unconditional and unique love to their children all across the globe. We have so many things in common, and we should only celebrate our differences. Our true nationality is mankind, said the English writer Herbert George Wells. I believe that if we manage to give other people even a small amount of the pure love that nature gives us, we will be handed the key to decipher most of its tales, which is what we have wanted since the beginning. Only after we have done this will we have the right to consider ourselves fluent in our common language. Thank you.
We have listened to Romanian with the speech called The Sea of Meaning. There are any questions, please?
Don't you think the reason why we forgot how to speak the language of nature is because it's so simple and primitive, and us being so evolved, we need a more complex language. So if we can't, then we need more than the communication that birds have to each other. Why should we value the language of nature if it's not valuable intrinsically?
Thank you for your question. I think that the language of nature is valuable. I see the man-made languages as small parts of a broken mirror, which is the language of nature. I think as we notice that there are so many similarities between languages, and the concepts that we want to describe, the things that we want to say, are virtually the same across all the languages. I think this thing has a core. That core is the language of nature, and the better we understand the language of nature, the better we will understand everything and all the languages in general. Thank you.
Please. I would like to invite now Ducoana Maria to speech Basel Heights.
Thank you. Have you ever noticed how nature makes a hierarchy out of its own levels? If not, we'll do it together. And ladies and gentlemen, honorable jury, my name is Ducoana Maria, and we are going to start our climb on these levels with basic elements like rocks and roses. Furthermore, we will observe the flutter of a butterfly wings, and last but not least, we will reach the final point of our ascent, the sky and its limits. You will see that nature is not only a subtle code with complex meanings, but in depth it can be also considered a pattern of behavior. So, let's get started. Firstly, I would like to make an imagination exercise with you. Think about two common natural elements, a rock and a rose. I know, it may sound weird, but trust me, it is worth your time. At the first glance, a rock is emotionless, it doesn't express anything to anybody, while a rose is a symbol of beauty and purity. In nature, they coexist. A rose can't have the attributes of a rock. Its toughness is what makes it truly unique. But have you made any connection between these two elements and we as human beings? If not, ladies and gentlemen, our worlds can be either roses or rocks. In our day-to-day life, we can choose how we want to be. We can all bloom, just like a rose, with love, friendship, humanity, positivity, or honesty. Or we can close ourselves and isolate, just like a rock. It is a matter of choice. It is your choice. Secondly, there is another natural element that teaches us a simple but basic lesson, the chaos theory, and it states like the following. It is being said that something as small as the flutter of a butterfly's wings can cause a typhoon halfway around the world. This theory was proven in 1961 by an American mathematician and meteorologist, Edward Lorenz, when he used a numerical code for predicting the weather. But instead of entering a full value, 0.506127, he entered a shorter one. This insignificant change of only 3 digits caused a completely wrong prediction of the weather. But I'd rather focus on the biological part of this and look at the butterfly. You will see that from its body all the way until the end of each wing, there are nerves branching. It is the same with us in life. Every small change that we are making in order to understand the language of nature can dramatically modify what is surrounding us. We, as humans, are all part of a system in which nature is our common root, and the only thing from our existence that will truly last is our energy. Finally, we have reached the top. We are up there in the sky, but don't tell me that sky is the limit when there are footprints on the moon, as once Paul Brand said, and this quote may be seen from multiple points of view. One of them is how heights are a way of expressing a language towards perfection. We can all agree with the fact that the unbroken bond between man and nature started from birds, and to be more precise, the legend of Icarus, with its man-made wings, and it goes all the way to the nowadays society with the masterpieces of engineering that are flying right now above our head. We, as humans, are constantly advancing, and we should never take time for granted because we don't have enough of it.
From another point of view, due to political or social reasons, we tend to believe that what sets us apart as humans is the language that we speak. But in reality, it's not about how an individual speaks a language, it's about how that language shapes one person's thinking. People will think differently according to what their language requires them to do, and this gives you the free space to ask yourself, why do I think the way I do? How can I think differently? And the most important one, what thoughts do I wish to create? In conclusion, today, as we slowly climbed on all these levels, I hope that I've helped you realize how nature offers us a way to prioritize our moral values and aspirations by bringing us closer to our true selves. Rocks and roses, butterflies and energies, and the impact that a language has are elements that transmit one of the most meaningful messages. And remember, I am energy, you are energy, and energy never dies. Thank you.
First question.
Which morals do you think nature would encourage?
Thank you for the question. From my own personal point of view, I do believe that nature helps us in a physical and moral way more than anything else. So, the morals that we should all develop, taking examples from nature, is the way we treat people. We should be way more kinder to each other because we're living into a society where we believe that everything is in a rush. Everything is a competition. Who has more money or many houses or more cars is the most important ones. But in reality, it's not about that. So, in conclusion, to answer to your question, my answer would be to be more kind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Time for granted. And my question for you is, why shouldn't we let time have staying in our day-to-day lives?
Well, thank you for your question. This idea of time is highly debatable. And to exemplify a little bit further, it is a theory that states that time is not passing. In fact, time is staying in place. We are passing through time. So, if we look at it from a social point of view, we tend to believe that we go through all of these years and we have an impact. But in reality, we don't have a material impact. The impact that we're leaving behind us stays in kind words said to somebody in need, in our actions, not the materials or what we left behind. So, to answer to this, we shouldn't take time for granted. Time is a relative thing. You can see it from multiple perspectives, and you can interpret it in any way you want to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is actually Korean one that we invited.
Forests, lakes and rivers, clouds, winds, stars and flowers, stupendous glaciers and crystal snowflakes. Every form of animate or inanimate existence. This is how Sweat Marden describes nature, and I couldn't agree more. On further reflection, though, I came to realize that there is more complexity to it than that. Nature is undeniably the force responsible for the physical life. Nature is indeed everything that surrounds us naturally. But often nature has been described as all the things that were not created by people. However, what's extremely essential is that we humans have always been in a profound and everlasting relationship with nature. And just like in a good relationship, the partners should be very much connected. The two need to speak the same language. They're supposed to know how to communicate, understand, and listen to each other. A good relationship is like a partnership, where the two partners work together. They invest and offer their best. My name is Horia Herci, and I hope that by the end of my speech I will have proven to you that firstly, nature is forever giving us spiritual and material gifts, and that secondly, humans in return are uncaring, unfair, and unloving towards her. Therefore, our relationship is in danger of becoming extinct forever. Firstly, there is no question that Earth has been a giving planet. Everything that humans have needed was provided by the natural world around us. food, water, medicine, materials for shelter, and even inspiration in art, poetry, and music. Let's take fresh water, for instance. There is no physical substance that humans require more than water. We can only survive a few hellish days without water. Another example would be medicine. The natural world around us has provided a multitude of life-saving medicines, from quinine to aspirin, and from morphine to numerous cancer and HIV-fighting drugs. Health. Recent research has shown that by simply staying in a green zone, such as a park, can improve one's mental and physical health. To exemplify further beyond such physical goods, the natural world around us provides less tangible, but just as important gifts in terms of beauty and art. Imagine poetry without flowers, painting without landscapes, film without scenery. Imagine if Shakespeare had no rose to compare Juliet to, and how the Jungle Book would look like without Baloo. How the Lord of the Rings series appear without the stunning mountain ranges of New Zealand. These are only a few examples which prove how dedicated, resourceful, and inspiring has nature been to us all. What about us now? What do we do for this relationship to work normally? Do we respond in the same way? And are we caring and loving towards her? Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, after a long-lasting relationship, the undeniable fact is that we disregard, deprive, and destroy nature with no sign of mercy. To tell you the truth, what we do is shamelessly subvert her to our own interest. We suffocate her with exhaust fumes, and we squeeze the non-renewable resources from her with no trace of regret. Sincerely speaking, what we do is plunder pristine lands, poison crystal clear lakes, winding rivers, and vast oceans. What else do? We remorselessly rip off her trees and ruin her forests in our unstoppable race for wealth. We exterminate species. We never stop, we do not care, and we are not impressed. We do not have mercy on nature. We are inhuman, cruel, and pitiless. To conclude with, ladies and gentlemen, the moment of truth has come. We are losing our most generous partner, the most resourceful, dedicated, and inspiring of all. Let's show our true heart. Let's lay our cards on the table and admit that we did wrong. Let's face it. We would be nothing without nature, and we need her desperately and undeniably. The end is about to come, and this is the most urgent of times and the most urgent of messages. SOS, save our souls, the souls of the nature, and the humans alike. Thank you.
Do you think that our lack of appreciation for nature is a result of our narrow perceptive field?
Thank you very much for your question. I think that nature is the greatest gift that has been given to humanity since the beginning, but I also think that sometimes we tend to do bad things to her. And sometimes nature takes its revenge, but I strongly believe that humankind is usually patient, and I strongly believe that in the future we will be able to establish a better connection with nature.
You said we should regard nature as a partner. Then what is your relationship with nature?
Thank you very much for your question. I have just turned this idea on every single side, and to tell you, I have a very strong relationship with nature. Since I was a little child, I enjoy staying at my grandparents, which live in the countryside, so I strongly believe that nature is a good friend for me because I spend a lot of time with it, and I think nature should be for us all a good friend because we should take care of each other.
Our next speaker is Kilian David. I'd like to invite
Just living is not enough. One must have sunshine, freedom, and a little flower. A quote by Hans Christian Andersen stating necessities that lack from our society. Hello everyone, my name is Kian David and the title of my speech is The Extinct Language of Nature. A beautiful fact about nature is that it doesn't choose its people. Nature is for all kinds of beings. Through history, it has given us everything we needed. Water, land, shelter, food, unbelievable views, and sometimes even destruction. We never seem to notice, but we would be nowhere without it. We gather all of our resources from some parts of nature. We take what we find, and we move on. Just like the primitive nomadic life form. Although not many of us can ride horses anymore. This is the way we act when using most of our resources. This is the way we chop down woods and gather fossil fuels. We take what we want, and we search for more. One problem with this behavior is that we don't seem to think ahead. We don't want to realize that at some point in time, we will have no more. Another problem is the way we gather our resources, or the way companies do it. Burning the lower quality gas that would be still usable but means no profit for them. Constantly releasing massive amounts of carbon dioxide, mutilating our nature. Although we cannot blame them, because we have created the system that lets this happen. But we are too lazy and selfish to act either way. We feel comfortable in our beloved consumerism, and we don't want to change our habits. Why would we? Because Earth is dying? Oh please, it's been dying from the Industrial Revolution. It is fine. And either way, we are not the problem, those giant companies are. We cannot do anything. Well, we could. And we should. There are many things one could do to make a change by saving energy, driving less, or paying attention to waste sorting. But who, out of all those people, do you think would act to save nature? Because sadly, there are fewer and fewer who actually know it. With the Industrial Revolution, not only the amount of carbon dioxide produced by humans started increasing, but people started working in factories, living in cities, and slowly but surely forgetting about nature. And this is why, in my opinion, the problem of climate change is a much deeper one. It all started with the Industrial Revolution, as a massive amount of people chose living in cities over living in smaller towns and villages. They did so to find jobs in factories and construction, and because they couldn't produce their own food there, they needed suppliers. So companies started producing food in a bigger amount, as well as manufacturing everything they needed, from clothes to household equipment, everything. So more and more jobs became available, and life in general became easier in cities. And this is where everything went wrong. Because companies started to work cost efficiently, meaning that they produced everything for the lowest possible price. This is why quality dropped, the amount of trash produced by a household increased, why food became unhealthy. But because it was profitable, they kept on going. More product meant more factories, more carbon dioxide, but more jobs. So more people living in cities and a bigger need for the product. And this only got worse as the population increased. And of course, they needed to serve that population with fast food and supermarkets, drugstores and cinemas, making sure you never need to leave town. So do you think a child, growing up surrounded by huge buildings covering the sun, where nothing around you tastes, looks, or feels natural would know what nature is? How can you expect someone to work for a cause they don't even know? For an example, a study from 2017 showed that every fourth 4-year-old in London doesn't know that milk comes from cows. They also think that cows drink milk rather than water. Every 8th of them doesn't know that cows moo. And almost a third of these kids think that some cows are purple. Now, we all know what chocolate brand gave them this idea. And after hearing this, you are shocked. Not to mention the fact that 7% of American adults think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. And in my opinion, all of our modern-day problems are mainly caused because people forgot about the language of nature. Problems such as depression, a lot of health issues, feminism, and even gender fluidity. We came far from where we started, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I'm sure we will only go further. I'm hopeful we can overcome this problem, and gladly steps have already been taken, such as the Kyoto Protocol, the European Union banning single-use plastic, and even the production of electric cars. Now, before you would go home and browse the internet how much time we have left, I suggest you go for a walk outside the city. Maybe even learn some facts about cows if you need to, so you would actually know what we are fighting for. So nature, could be a common language once again. Thank you for your attention.
We have listened to Gillian David, the discourse, the extinct language of nature. The first question is.
So many times when we talk about solutions, we tend to distance ourselves from reality. So if we talk to poor people, how can they afford overly expensive vegetarian or vegan food, and why shouldn't they go to the fast foods if it's cheap and affordable? Why shouldn't we work in factories if we need a living wage? Should we starve ourselves just for the hope of nature being better right now, or should we prioritize our subsistence and our personal needs?
Thank you for the question. Interesting one. Well, first of all, fast food isn't healthy. So even if you're poor, I think the best way would be to move to the countryside and work land, maybe make your own food, vegetables, and live healthy in the nature. Fast food, if you can afford fast food, you can afford this lifestyle.
Next question.
If forests are green and oceans are blue, what color would you describe to these giant companies who destroy nature?
Thank you for your question. Well, black or gray because of the smoke, and black because they are killing our nature. In my opinion, the only way to save our nature right now would be to work with these giant companies, because they are the problem, really. Of course, we would have to work as well, but if we could convince them with a rewarding system, probably reward them with money or whatever we can, so they would defend nature, we could work out a way to save it after all. Thank you.
Among which you mentioned also feminism and gender fluidity.
Yes.
So how do you see those as modern day problems, and how do you relate that to us having forgotten the language of nature?
Thank you for your question. I'm actually glad you asked that. I would have 2 points to state that feminism is a modern day problem. The first one, which I assume most of you will like, and the second one, which you might not. The first one would be that feminism exists. Feminism shouldn't exist. We shouldn't need it. In my opinion, it should be obvious that these two genders should be equal. That it would be obvious. The second point would be that modern day feminism, we can speak about the third wave of feminism these days, in my opinion, doesn't fight for equality anymore. They achieved that through the first 2 waves. And I think that they became the very thing they sought to fight against, as they are tending to create constant conflict between the 2 genders, often with propagandas and fake news even sometimes. And I can't support such thing. And gender fluidity, well, if you take a look at nature, I'm sure you can't find it anywhere except at humans, because we separated ourselves from nature, and by living in cities and forget about where we came from, we had too much time in our hands, and we made up things. And I highly believe that other genders than male and female are made up. Thank you.
I'd like to invite the next speaker, Niculescu George Alexander, with learning to understand nature.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Alex, and I'm here to deliver my speech, which is entitled Learning to Understand Through Nature. Learning is a process during which we accumulate and memorize new information on different topics, and understanding is what we all strive and aim for. But how do we achieve this understanding, especially through this beautiful common language we call nature? Firstly, I would like to talk about the symbolism of nature. Symbols take form of signs, objects, or gestures, and indicate certain ideas, emotions, or feelings. When talking about nature, I can say that there is no greater or more diverse source for symbolic meanings than our natural environment. For example, the white dove signifies purity and peace, while the lion is associated with power and courage. Communication can be easily achieved through the symbols, but how do we actually do it? Well, a simple gesture such as giving someone a flower can show love, affection, or appreciation. Even though, over time, we as people have distanced ourselves from each other and put up these language and cultural barriers between ourselves, this simple gesture could easily send a message across, allowing us to communicate with each other. However, we must also be aware of all the signs nature so generously shares with us and interpret them. Think about the yellow leaves falling from the trees. They tell us that autumn is ending and that winter is coming. This is a normal sign that we have gotten used to seeing. So what about the real signs that we should learn from? The ice caps melting, animals going extinct, climate change, and the forest maybe cutting down so unconsciously. These are real problems that we must acknowledge. This should make us understand that our actions and decisions not only affect us, but our surroundings and the people around us as well. Understanding the tremendous impact that we have over nature is the key to solving this problem. After all, this is our planet, our home and origin, yet so many people seem to ignore this common language and distance themselves from everything and get buried in the concrete jungles that we have created. Secondly, a good way to get a better understanding of ourselves is to observe and analyze every little detail in nature. The bark on the trees, the fur on the animals, or the leaves on the plants. We've actually been doing so for millennia and we've come across some amazing things. Medicinal recipes from plants like aloe vera, or various uses for different types of rock. Nature has helped us in many ways. But there is something in particular that I really want to talk about, and that is the discovery of numbers, mathematics, and geometry hiding in plain sight. From different species of flowers having specific numbers of petals, and Fibonacci spiral found in seashells, to stunning geometrical shapes seen in perfectly formed snowflakes, we have found and observed certain patterns which have allowed us to interpret and understand nature from a different point of view and which have given us a new perspective on it. I've actually asked myself, what possible correlation could these patterns have to getting a better understanding of ourselves? And after giving it some thought, I've come to the conclusion that if we have been able to find these things in nature, then why wouldn't we be able to do the same thing to ourselves? Some other people have thought about this before me, and they have decided to study the tiniest details in our behavior, and more particularly, our body language and our facial expressions. Imagine this. Every frown, every breath, every smile, every blink of the eye, and every sudden contraction of a muscle could tell us when someone is trying to send or hide something from us. Every person is different and unique, but certain patterns can indicate when people are lying or telling the truth. Over time, we have got so far, and these methods have been perfected so much that they have proven to be useful in different fields. Interrogators who use these methods can easily get information out of their suspects simply from their body language, and these methods are also used by psychologists in order for them to understand what frustrates and truly causes us pain. So, all of these symbols, all of these signs and these patterns that I have mentioned here are nothing but parts of the common language nature uses to communicate with us. It is our duty to open our minds and be all ears in order to get connected with nature and ourselves. This way, we can make incredible discoveries and truly comprehend how connected everything is to nature. Once and for all, we must acknowledge that nature keeps us grounded and united, and through its common language, we can learn to understand it and ourselves. Thank you.
You talked about human expressions. Do you think nature has emotions?
Beautiful question.
Thank you.
Personally, I do believe that nature has expressions, and the beauty of nature is the fact that every single person in this room can interpret those emotions the way they want to. That is the beauty of nature. When you look at a tree, every single person in this room can see it differently, and they can be affected or they can be touched by that tree in a different way.
You were talking about body language and gestures.
Yes.
This is commonly used as a way of manipulation as well. How do you think we should filter out these?
Could you repeat the last part of the question?
How do you think we should filter out these? Filter out.
I see. Well, I believe that the way to filter out these manipulative ways is to actually study these methods and understand how the body language works, and how we could filter out those gestures that could shove some ideas into your head and protect ourselves from that manipulation.
He says we should reconnect to nature. But what precisely can we do to achieve this connection?
Interesting question. Right now, in the current situation, it is very difficult to actually connect with everyone else, even though deep down to our roots, we are all connected to nature. I personally believe that a simple walk in the park and just observation of the flowers, the birds, and the trees, and actually the people in that park could create a small connection that over time can be strengthened and can connect us all again. It will be a long way away, but it can all start with a simple stroll in the park.
Thank you very much. Invite the next speaker, Palma Theodora. It's the act of speaking without words.
A brief examination of how our society prioritizes environmental concerns and a quick analysis on how we, as individuals, behave shows that over time our relation with nature has changed, to say the least. We have lost sight of how connected and reliant we are on natural factors and resources, and started to see ourselves as rather independent and superior from them. This has had an impact not only on the way we undertake our daily chores, but also on our outlook on life. The aftermaths of this separation vary and are by all means numerous. However, I would like to insist on how our way of communicating has changed due to this growing estrangement. To begin with, in today's society, we rely heavily on words to communicate, whether it's in a written or spoken form. And with this so-called social media culture, where communication takes place most of the time online, we lose a great lot in the process of successfully transmitting information. Why? Because more than half of the message you are trying to disseminate is understood from the non-verbal elements. The body's posture, hand gestures, facial expression. Body language plays a crucial role on how we perceive and are perceived. So, don't you think that decoding the Rosetta Stone of this language would enhance our ability to better comprehend the world? I think it might do the trick. Ironically, we have become so efficient at speaking that we have forgotten how to observe, how to enjoy the exterior world, which, although not very talkative, very much alive and full of essence. Nature has nurtured this art of speaking without words for lack of an articulate language. Instead of using metaphors to describe a beautiful scenery, such as a book would do, it uses sounds, colors, textures, aromas, elements that ultimately make up its own body language, its unique way of communicating with us. And it sometimes speaks so deeply and wonderfully that even great poets fail to describe this majestic beauty through words. A simple look, however, at the mechanics of nature has taught us and continues to teach us a lot in terms of innovative scientific discoveries. An example would be biomimetics or biomimicry, the science of imitating elements, structures, and symbols from nature with the aim of solving complex human problems. And even short of practical purposes, we have so much to learn from nature in terms of equilibrium, persistence, better understanding, and successful communication, all by putting our powers of observation to good use. What is more, animal communication is a rapidly growing area of studies in disciplines such as animal behavior, cognition, neurology, and sociology. This type of study helps us understand many elements of animal demeanor, such as symbolic name use, emotional expression, learning, and it furthermore emphasizes the great resemblance between how animals and humans function. What is more, there is a plethora of examples of successful nonverbal communication in nature. Whether we are talking about chimpanzees that greet each other by touching hands, elephants that show affection by entwining their trunks, or even baby humans that express their needs solely through body language up until they learn how to speak. It is this easiness of conveying an idea through a simple set of gestures that seem to elude us when interacting with another human being. We have a tendency, on one hand, to overuse words with explanation, excuses, and even tenderness, and on the other hand, to avoid face-to-face communication, dread the idea of a date, an interview, or even worse, public speaking. And this is because our power of interpreting body language has become rusty from not receiving enough attention. All in all, being aware of the natural language spoken around us can open doors to better understanding ourselves. Amusingly enough, I have been delivering a 5-minute monologue on the power of speaking without words. But in the same time, I have noticed both your reactions and my own. I noticed when you caught interest, or on the contrary, when you lost it. When you agreed, or disagreed. I noticed how I could focus better and deliver better when I didn't think of myself as the center of your attention, but rather you the center of mine. Nature and circumstance can teach important lessons on self-knowledge, self-reflection, and successful communication. We speak so much of the word barrier, and we put so much effort in creating a common language that we overlook the fact that it existed all along. After all, as Peter F. Drucker said, the most important thing in communicating is hearing what isn't said. And that's the lesson our common language, nature, beautifully teaches us. Thank you.
Congratulations for your speech. Enid, you've mentioned the idea of overused words. What overused words would nature have?
Thank you for your question. I don't really think nature speaks through words, but if it were to speak through words, I don't think their overused properties would somehow affect us, because its most used words are beautiful, power. Maybe if we were to speak anger, then we would have a problem. But most of the time, it expresses peace. So overusing peace is not really something to fear, to be afraid of.
How should we train ourselves to understand nonverbal communication much better?
Thank you for your question. I personally believe that the best way to learn something is through observation and experiment. So simply noticing how people around us behave, and even ourselves, because we are our greatest subject. And then experiment. As you've mentioned before, there are people who train their bodies in order to dissimulate, to lie. But in truth, when your true intention are given away by your nonverbal communication, like I'm feeling nervous, so I have the tendency to over-gesticulate, and you can interpret that.
Do you think that nature would like to be written about or talked about as we do today, or even admired, like a landscape? Thank you.
Thank you. I think nature is fierce. I think she sometimes can be proud. So I think she appreciates our efforts to encase its amazing structure and complexity into words, art, and poetry. So I think she would appreciate the effort.
What non-verbal message would you send to nature?
Well, I'd give it a hug and a thumbs up. And you never know what a smile can do, so smile to show support, to show that in my situation as a small human being, I'm doing the best I can to make myself aware and to try to pursue a way to save it.
I'd like to invite the next speaker, Zekerians Peter, with character personality.
What do you think when you look at me? Bookworm, because of my glasses. The student who studies for every single test and never cheats. The anxious boy who cannot fit in. Isn't it interesting that even though we've never met, you already know so much about me? Or at least you think you do. You already had assumptions about me when you first saw me, deep down in your subconsciousness. And I don't blame you. It's not your fault. It is because of a thing we all share that helps us to communicate without using words. A language that is common due to our human nature. human nature. It's an interesting and frankly yet quite annoying thing. Why am I saying this? Because it separates us into these oddly named groups such as introverts, extroverts, phlegmatics, and colorists, and we cannot even width them. Human nature is strongly connected to our surroundings. We develop abilities to record senses, we explain those, and then we learn from them. We're so influenced by the outside world that we don't even realize how it shapes our personality, creating something called a character in others' eyes. When you read a story or watch a play, you make relations with the characters. You sympathize with them, almost feeling like you already know them. Well, that's because you do. You see, human nature has planted templates of characters in the brain that we can connect with certain people judging by their appearance, voice, and so on. It's a secret little cheat sheet playwrights call the typology of characters. The despot, the lover, the hero, these are only some of the recurring characters in any types of stories. But life is also an endless story filled with many of these characters. Even at the beginnings, people had certain roles. That's why the cavemen who carved doodles on walls are now considered artists. The person who discovered fire is a scientist, and the one who carried children is now a caretaker. Roles are also found in animal behavior. The hunter, the builder, the protector. It seems like these general types of characters are encrypted into the universe. At this point you might ask, why all these characters? Why all the differences? It's easy, because they help us to communicate, and not just in an ordinary way. You see, communication is happening every time we interact with someone. As humans, we have our common language defined by our nature that uses these fixed characters as basis of information. From little movements to appearance, we can connect faces with certain types of characters we meet throughout our lives. That's why we know what kind of people to avoid or to see, even if we've never seen them before. Still, many people consider linking a stranger with a certain character stereotypical and rude. Now, how many of you think of yourself as completely unbiased? Or that you have never had a critical opinion about someone at first sight? Probably many of you started thinking that, no, I don't judge people at first sight, and if so, I'm sorry that I have to tell you this, but you're all liars. We all do that, even though we don't realize it. Our appearances send a signal in the receiver's brain, which creates the first impression. And that is perfectly normal. Moreover, it is very good and useful because it is a base of a connection that helps to bring forward the true self of somebody. Without it, we wouldn't know who we are. And what would the world do with a bunch of existentially confused people? Our first impression might be wrong though, and usually it is. However, we need to learn to accept this. As I said, connecting a stranger to a certain character isn't wrong, but defining someone as that could be disastrous. Thus, in order to understand the true essence of humanity, we need to dig deeper in our brains to find out how these characters live in each and every one of us, constantly helping us to connect and to communicate without using words. Now, let's suppose that I don't wear these glasses, and now I would ask you, am I the same person as the one who has told you this speech so far? Is your opinion the same about me? I'll let you answer this for yourselves. I do believe that we should never fall into the trap of considering someone, or maybe even ourselves, as a certain character. Our personality is much more complex than a restricted character. Let's not confuse these two terms. Although this might sound conventional, after all, we really are special as snowflakes. We, as individuals, have to make ourselves special. Our talents, skills, and ideas all take part in creating the whole. And now, at the end of my speech, I advise all of you to live as a personality, not as a character, because the latter is a limited one. But your personality is only yours, and that's what makes humans unique. Thus, don't be afraid of being your true self. Don't try to hide your own way of being just for the sake of people, of what they might think about you. As Oscar Wilde once said, it's beauty that captures your attention, but personality that captures your heart. And that's what we should concentrate on, letting our personality evolve, inventing new ideas and reshaping our values, capturing people's hearts, and not just their attention. Thank you.
So in your speech you have been defining stereotyping as being completely negative. But I think it is a natural mechanism in order to protect us and in saving more lives than actually damage to some. So my question is, would you walk the streets of Caracas, Venezuela, which has one of the highest criminality rates in the world, or would you not? Because your speech concludes to the statement that you would, because you shouldn't fear stereotypes.
Thank you. You're right, yeah. You shouldn't fear stereotypes. And I think that when you hear information about certain things, then you believe those information if the source is correct, or if you believe in the source. And it wouldn't actually be stereotyping, in my opinion, to not go in a certain place that's considered dangerous. But if you see a person who you think is dangerous just because of their appearance, then you usually try to avoid them, but you shouldn't do that. I mean, why would you? Because you don't know anything about it, you don't receive any information, just those signals that you receive from them. So you shouldn't actually concentrate on what you receive, you should concentrate on where you receive those information. Thank you.
You mentioned a quote by Oscar Wilde, an amazing writer. Do you think that in the book, The Picture of Dorian Gray, the artist chose to paint the beauty of the character or the personality?
Thank you for your question. I think, obviously, the personality was the most important thing in that book, in my opinion. Beauty was considered in a very different way than it usually is in our lives, in the book. Because painting a picture that turns out to be, let's say, uglier than it should have been, actually represents the author, I mean, the artist. So the emotions that he felt were actually caused by the painting, and the destruction of the painting was actually caused by his emotions. So I think the artist concentrated more on the personality and less on the beauty. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Tordai Mihali, last speaker, with the subject Unjustified.
6,000 years. That's how old civilized society is. And in that time, we've managed to accomplish some really great things. We've been on the moon, we've built planes that are faster than the speed of sound. We invented antibiotics, and yeah, we voted for Donald Trump. But another great accomplishment of humanity is the fact that for the past 40 years, we've managed to kill 60% of our animal population. Humans only count for 0.01% of Earth's biomass, but they're responsible for the destruction of 83% of the wildlife. 108 million people died in wars caused by the destructive nature of humanity in the 20th century. A few words to our subject. I agree. Nature truly is a common language, but we forgot how to speak it. 3 questions that I'm going to answer in this speech. Why is nature a common language? Why did we forget how to speak it? And of course, how do we fix that? So why is nature a common language? And if you think about it, we're all structurally the same. We all bleed, we all suffer, we all feel an urge to survive. Scientists have even found out that animals can suffer from clinical depression. A baby elephant that was rejected by his mother refused to socialize, stand up, or eat for 2 weeks straight. Animals and depression. Now, of course, if that doesn't convince you, we're also interdependent neighbors. If bees were to disappear today, there would be no humanity in 4 years. The survival of our entire species is contingent on the existence of bees. Now, it's pretty clear that we're quite similar and interdependent. So, what's the problem? And that leads me to my second question. Why did we forget how to speak it? And it comes down to the intrinsic selfishness and egocentrism of humanity, and more specifically on nature, it's the exploitation of ascriptive characteristics that are meant to justify immoral endeavors. What do I mean by that? It's that common belief that because animals are so different and less intelligent than humans, then it's only justified for us to eat them or make pretty clothes out of them. They are different, so it's justified. They are different, so it's justified. They are Jewish, they are different, so it's justified, Hitler said. They are black, they are different, so it's justified, Southern Americans prior to the Civil War said. We do the same thing over and over again, but we always think that this time it is truly different. So what is the worst part of it? Now, I give you many statistics for why we destroy nature. Do you really care about nature more now? Probably not, and that's the worst part. That we never realize how wrong we are up until we do. As you don't find animals and pollution as being so controversial, neither did Americans in the 1800s find slavery. But we always wake up too late. Now, given the political status quo and trends in veganism and animal rights activism, we'll probably reach the point in a few decades when we'll stop eating animal products. So the question is, do we want to be remembered as the generation who woke up too late, just as another generation who woke up too late? Or do we want to wake up now and save billions of animals? Now, because I'm pragmatic, let's get into the last question. So how do we fix all of that? Now, the problem is that the ability of the food industry to hide the reality of food production behind advertisement and lobbying is tremendous. We need to break that disconnect between us and what happens in the backstage that the food industry so desperately relies upon. Now, the important part here is that if people saw, not read, actually saw, how does an abattoir look like, we'd have more people today who value the life of animals. That is important. But from a more philosophical perspective, I think we should change the criterion we use when we evaluate our moral behaviors, what is right or wrong. Because morality is intrinsically subjective, okay? For us, it's really important and really normal for women to have the right to vote and drive a car. Well, Saudi Arabians would quite disagree. So we should change that criterion into an objective one, which is suffering. If my action were to cause more suffering than the absence of it, that is wrong. And it's important because that would have saved the Jews, the black people, and women across history, an objective criterion. The biggest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people that he did not exist. What we do is wrong, and we do not realize it. Let's stop. Thank you.
You talked in your speech about the food industry, which mainly consists of big corporations, which are mainly led by people. Who do you think is to be blamed for destroying nature in these corporations?
I'm gonna be a bit socialist. I think it's capitalism. Because we believe in abundance as being the one that brings all our benefits, choosing from a lot of movies, choosing from a lot of songs. And that is really great about capitalism. When that abundance and that need to do profit relies so desperately upon the killings of billions of animals, then it is not justified. Because people say, well, it does money, it brings benefits for the population, then it's only justified. Well, in the southern part of America, when slavery was legal, they were very, very wealthy and rich. Does that mean that the Civil War wasn't justified? Of course not. It was, even though it brought bad outcomes. So it's humanity that is to blame, and it's the intrinsic need of capitalism to accumulate wealth that is to blame. Thank you.
In the back, please.
Considering the dire situation that we find ourselves in, the destruction of nature that you mentioned, do you think that this context can excuse acts of eco-terrorism?
I actually do. I believe in civil disobedience. It's precisely what many people did, like Nelson Mandela, against the apartheid in South Africa. The belief that if the state doesn't represent your interest and that you're harmed, that is only justified for you to not respect the law in order to protect what you believe in. So when it comes to bioterrorism, The fact that governments are corrupt and paid off by big corporations in order not to protect the environment, it is only justified for people when they're not represented by the law to take that law in their hands and make justice for them. Because we created a system of justice for people and not corporations. When the state stops respecting and representing the people, they lose their legitimacy and the law itself loses its role.
Do you think we destroy nature besides being greedy because we are afraid of our own mortality and how small we actually are?
I don't think it comes down to that. Many times we tend to overly complicate things, finding philosophy in nature. I think it's really easy. We're greedy and we want to survive, so we start eating in animals. That's pretty normal for us, and nature actually agrees with that. But it comes down to when we do that too much. For instance, the United States alone is responsible for 300 million of food waste every year. It's okay for you to eat in order to survive, that's morally culpable, but it's negative and immoral when it's about comfort, when it's about arrogance and egoism. We don't need to eat as much as we do right now. So I don't think we feel small, I think we feel too mighty, too big, so it's justified for us.
What do you think would be the first big step we should take in order to improve sustainability and change the actual state of affairs?
There needs to be a twofold solution from us. First, it's our daily lives behaviors. Such things, small things, such as not eating that much and actually consuming less meat, or actually changing one meal a day into a vegan one, not necessarily going vegan. But I think we too often rely on individuals to take actions. If governments, such as through the Paris Agreement, don't take action as well, you can never actually change something. We might be more woke, let's say, but if millions of people won't agree with us, they're not going to work with us, we'll never achieve something. So it needs to be the government as well as the people that work towards that part of enabling and emancipating nature. Thank you.
Are you vegetarian?
Sorry?
Are you vegetarian?
No, and let me explain why, because it seems pretty hypocritical for me to talk about it. As I said in a question, I think nature agrees that for your survival, it is justified for you to eat meat. But as long as I don't do it out of an urge, out of comfort, just because I want to eat a Big Mac right now, and I do it only for my survival, then it is justified. Just as animals eat animals that are weaker than them in order to survive. That's moral. That the moral nonce, and when it becomes wrong, is when we do that not because we need to do it, but because we want to do it.
The amazing discourses. I guess the time has come for the judges to decide who is the winner of this year's edition, and I give you the word.
Meanwhile, everybody will be, I guess, taking a break, and we'll just come back here and show the Okay. Are there people outside as well?
I think yes.
Yes, maybe, yes. They should probably come in. I think they want to be here. Well, most of us are here, I guess. Okay, so no worries, that's okay. Goody, excellent. Now we are actually all here. So, again, I know that usually by this stage everybody is very excited and they want to get to results and especially feedback, which is the most important part. So I'm not going to go on too long here. Once again, congratulations to everybody. We've heard some really interesting speeches today and some really interesting ideas. And what we are going to do is that we are going to have Andrea and Kendall say a few words, and they're going to mention a few aspects that we all felt we would like to point out. Some of the things that you've done really well, and some of the things that you might take under consideration for further improvement. And then we'll go on to announcing the results. So I would like to first invite Andrea Nasser to say a few words.
Hi, first of all, congratulations, everybody. Now being here, I realize what you've been through, and it's not easy to be in front of so many people, and most of them people that you are competing against. So on our marking scheme, we have something called expression and delivery, which earns you 35 points if you do it perfectly. And this includes how you handle yourself when you are in front of the audience, how you try to catch, how you manage to catch, and how you keep the attention of the people in the room. So maybe gestures, which some of you used too wildly, let's say. Most of you did it perfectly. Kept your hands in a little box in front of you, let's say, and didn't gesture too much around your head, for instance, which was perfect, and it was one of the points of the feedback from last year, which I saw, and people understood this and applied it, which is very good. I also saw some very good techniques of drawing in the audience by using visualizations, for instance. One of the speakers asked us to close our eyes and imagine something, and she was quite imperative about it. She really had everybody close our eyes and do the exercise, which is perfect. We are all going to remember this exercise and what we saw with our mind's eye. Another point is your voice. Some of you spoke too quietly, maybe, and some of you spoke too fast. None of you spoke too slowly. None of you, but some spoke too fast, which is something you should remember, and maybe use this for other occasions. Try to make your point by speaking slowly and giving your audience the chance to understand and process, really process what you are saying. Because if you go too fast, they're not going to be able to keep up with you, especially if your arguments are so focused and so condensed in a short time. Another point I would like to make, and it's probably the most important, is smiling. People didn't do it enough. Somehow this comes across as the speaker being detached from their speech. So you should show some implication, some emotion. It's not wrong, and it connects you with the audience. Okay, you make eye contact, and most of you did. Most of you really made good eye contact and singled out people in the audience, like singled out people in the audience. Very good. But you didn't smile. Even the few who used humor, very good again. And they managed to draw some laughs from the audience. They kept a straight face while the people in the audience were laughing. Why would you do that? You need to connect. You connected by making people laugh, but you disconnected by not being there with them and at least smiling. That's something maybe to remember for next time when you are, I'm sure, in this position again, because all of you will be public speakers. I am very sure. You are all very good at this. So this is it, I think, about delivery and expression. Congratulations again, and I will let Kendall do the content part of the feedback.
Okay, so I think firstly to say thank you. It's always a huge pleasure for me to have the opportunity once a year to come and to listen to some of the best speakers from around Romania. And it's an incredible thought for me that, you know, some of you from the west of Romania, some from the north up towards Transylvania, some from the east. Unfortunately, no one from Bucharest again. Okay, I'm not sure if that's an indictment of the intelligence and the ability in Bucharest, but it is certainly something for the schools in Bucharest, the Savars and Vitazus and Ciudavianus to think about. And I think it also shows the passion and the conviction that some of you have had that you've been selected in some of these other very, you know, good schools which have national reputations academically. We don't have candidates sitting here in front of us. So well done to you for being the 10 that were chosen to be here. In terms of the content, I think it's important to return maybe to some of the basics. And I think you begin with the theme itself. You look at that theme, and it's something to do with nature has a common language. And you have to think, what do I feel passionate about? You know, what does that theme mean to me? And you have to find some way to interpret that theme into an idea that you feel strongly enough to sit down to write a speech about, not to go to a competition, but a speech to give to a room full of people that is a meaningful and worthwhile speech that hopefully will have a difference, make a difference, you know, have a difference in each person's life. And I think that's the first thing that distinguished the first 2 or 3 speakers. When we went into the adjudicator's room to discuss, you know, we sort of said, well, let's number everyone individually from 1 to 10 in terms of who stood out and who didn't. And then I think Alec quite rightly sort of said, well, you know, let's cut the long story short and let's just say who were the best 2 or 3 that we saw. And without you know, too much variation or argument, there were 2 or 3 students that for each of us stood out, and we all felt the very same about that student. So clearly there was something that was distinguishing 2 or 3 of you today from the other 7. And for me, I think one of the aspects that distinguished you was the message itself. 2 or 3 of you had a strong message. And how could I sort of eloquently convey that idea to you in a way that you might appreciate and understand it better? I think 7 of you probably gave a lecture on a topic. So you spoke about a topic, you informed us, there was relevant content, but there weren't really people in the room connecting with you when you were speaking. And they certainly didn't know what to do with that topic when they leave the room today. So there has to be something that incites them to want to change, to do something differently. So to share information is one thing, but if you have the captivated audience in front of you, and very rarely do you have that, well, you don't want to waste that opportunity. And yes, okay, people are obliged to be here, and they're probably thinking about their own speech to not have time to really focus on your speech, because they're thinking, okay, I've got 2 more speakers to go, and then I have to speak. So it is even more difficult to engage an audience which is preoccupied with something that is about to happen. But it also shows what a powerful speech it is when you distract someone from their own thoughts enough for them to become lost in your thoughts. And they can't become lost in your thoughts unless you feel very passionately about something. So my first advice to you with content is to go away, look at that topic, and if you don't have something that you feel passionate about, then maybe you can borrow someone else's passion. You can ask people what their ideas are, and then maybe you'll have something from someone else, an idea from them that they are passionate about, and then suddenly, you know, you feel passionate about that as well, because that's what a great speech is as well. You share your passion, and suddenly there's 2 million people who are standing in front of you who are up in rebellion. It comes 20 million, and then suddenly you have a revolution, an 89 revolution, and suddenly we move from capitalism to democracy. You know, and that, you know, those revolutions, I mean, nowadays they happen with Hotmail, as we saw in Egypt. You know, someone sends out a message multimedia, everyone is up in arms, and before you know it, the government's been overthrown. But before then, it was people standing on a podium, you know, or you know, on a raised step somewhere, speaking to the general crowd, and the people getting involved, feeling connected. So 2 or 3 of you had a real reason to be here because you seem to feel strongly about it. And, you know, maybe your message was to go back into nature and reconnect, to begin that process of finding that common language again, and that becoming a part of a process that might lead to a deeper connection. Or maybe it was the idea of focusing on your personality and coming up with an idea, so not being a character in a book, not being a character like everyone else who's a character in this common narrative of nature, and not standing out as a character who has developed himself to become a personality, and one that distinguishes themselves, that people want to start to follow now. You're a leader. Or maybe it was someone who said, don't be the generation that was one generation behind. You know, don't be the ones that could have done something, but unfortunately, like my generation, we definitely, we've made the problem a bigger problem for the next generation. So maybe the next generation will solve that problem, or maybe it will unfortunately be the generation after that generation that has to come up with a solution. Structure has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And again, some of you were very effective in your beginning, and you managed to get the audience. Some of you were a little bit less effective in that area. So you might want to go back and look at some of the great public speakers of our time and think, how did they captivate the audience? Because first of all, you have to get the audience, and then you have to keep them. Structure. I think some of you had that lovely flow of structure where you connected something halfway through or towards the end to an idea that was raised at the start. And public speaking is well known for that, and stand-up comedy, it's even more important. So I think those of you who had the ability to connect parts of the later part of your speech to the earlier part of the speech, that was always memorable for me, and I always thought it was well done. And humour, I think. Again, I think I mentioned it last year. That comic relief is so important. Speeches often tend to dote on the serious side of things. When you can laugh at yourself, which is always the safest form of humour, that's the best. That's what I recommend. It's always a little bit dangerous when you try to laugh at an aspect of society because you may be in danger of offending some people. So it's better for me to laugh at myself as a human being in my own failings, or maybe as a man, at the risk of offending men in the audience. I certainly would be reticent to make humour of women or minority groups because you're more likely to come across as insensitive. So humour is important. And I think the last point, which I have mentioned a little already, is the idea of action. It's all well to stand here for 5 minutes and to try and incite people or to inform people, but I think you either want to incite them into personal action so they make a personal difference to their own lives, or even more powerful, you incite them to want to affect the lives of the people around them. Maybe it's through being an outstanding role model of an idea, or maybe it's actually by, I wouldn't say militantly, but certainly actively trying to promote some idea. And I think, vegetarianism, veganism might be an idea that you could play with. Think, wow, you're so healthy, you seem so happy, you seem like the sort of person I'd like to be. And then they ask questions about who you are, and they find out that you're a vegetarian or a vegan, and they think, okay, well maybe that's something that I want to explore. Because if that's one of the things that's brought you a sense of happiness and balance, then maybe that's a happiness and a balance that I'm missing, rather than you militantly going out and saying, "You're a criminal for eating meat!" and attacking someone in the audience, or attacking someone on the street, like the people who wear fur, and you see people with buckets of paint going and throwing them the paint across them, trying to make a political statement because they're wearing a $20,000 mink coat. There are different levels of activism, and I think, as Gandhi and many others have shown us, passive activism is definitely, I think, the way to lead society forward. So if you can lead by example, and I try to explain that to my students, lead by example, be less concerned with what the other people are doing. Don't try and change them. Let them change themselves. They have to find their own process of change, and it will be a lot more meaningful for them if they do that. It's best to be the example, the role model of change. and then to lead society forward in that way. So I think this was the highest standard I've seen across. As Andrea said, it was very difficult to say that anyone wasn't dressed very well. If you were. I think it was very difficult to say that people didn't have control of their body language. I think your hand movements, your eye contact, overall it was probably the best I've seen in the last 4 or 5 or more years. So I think all the aspects of public speaking you have, and you've honed them to a very high standard. I think all that's really missing is the passion of a message, and a message that is going to be meaningful to the audience, something that they may want to listen to. Or, as some of you, a couple of you, you challenged the audience and you showed them that they were failing in different ways, and maybe that will lead them to change as well. But it's always a little bit more tricky when you challenge your audience in a way that you make them feel uncomfortable. Sometimes that will work, sometimes that won't. But I guess you try in the affirmative, and if you can't bring about the social change that you want in the affirmative by leading them to the water, then maybe you have to become more active in ways that challenges them and gets them outside their comfort zone. Humans by nature are creatures of habit, and we don't like change. We don't deal with change very well. And I've seen lots of examples of that within my own life and within the life of my family, close friends and family. We don't deal with change very well. So, I think what we know more than anything else right now is change is needed. I hear sort of within the next 50 years that we will be facing certain challenges on this planet that may determine the future of our species and all the species. And I can only hope that we all have the courage and the conviction to change and to get out of the comfort zone, to be someone different than we are today, tomorrow. Because if we continue to be the person that we are tomorrow, being the person we are today, then I think unfortunately there won't be too many more speech competitions to be had. We'll all be addressing much more serious issues. So without further ado, thank you for being my captivated audience. I hope that I've shared some points with you that might help you in directing you next year. And as Ella reflected to me in the adjudicator's room, a point that I thought was a very nice point. She said that often the students who return do very well, and that was the case last year. And we've seen it in previous years, and it seems to have been the case this year as well, that students who have come back a second year seem to have learned from that experience, from being present in the first year, and they've learned from the mistakes of the people that they saw, but they've also learned by picking up the very best of those speakers and then bringing it back. And the person who won, it's probably a person, I don't think I've ever given 100 or even close to 100, but the person who won today, I wouldn't advise that person to change their structure. I wouldn't advise that person to change the way they animatedly delivered the message. I wouldn't advise them to change either the delivery or the content. I think they took all the very best aspects of what I've seen in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, and they really delivered a great speech. So, I think take note of the person who lifts the Champions Trophy today, because I think that's really what you want to come back and do next year. And if instead of having 3 or 4 outstanding speeches, I'd like to think next year that some of you will make my job a lot more difficult. So when we go into the adjudicator's room, instead of it's like, let's just look at these 3 and decide out of these 3 which was the very best. I'd like to sit in the adjudicator's room and just like shake my head and just go, oh boy, where do we begin? There were just, there were 10 students that were 95 to 100. It was so close that it's really, I can't do it objectively. It's going to be subjective. So come back and put me in a difficult position next year. I'll appreciate it. So well done. And I hand over to Ella.
And also, before getting started with that, because we were having a conversation about this in the beginning, as you do know from previous years, because you have been able, even though you weren't in the finals, you were able to see the people that have made it to the finals. We do film this, and we also take pictures, and we do post it on our YouTube channel. Okay, so in case somebody does not want that, you should let us know. But otherwise, we'll just assume that you consent to that. And without further ado, we will start with the honorable mentions, and first honorable mention goes to Teodora Parmar. Well done, congratulations. Also, it's perfectly fine, you don't have to rush back to your seat. If you have like friends or family or somebody taking photos of you, it's okay to take a moment, don't worry about it. Another honorable mention goes to Ioan Horia Herciu. Honorable mention also goes to Ana Maria Ducu. Mention also for Vlad Andrei Dogaru. And honorable mention for Mihail Budan. Well done. And there's a smile. Yep. Honorable mention for Anda Catalina Barashku. Congratulations. I think you want to have a look over there. Yeah. The first row. Okay. And our final honorable mention goes to George Alexandru Neașcu. And now, going into the heart of the country, basically. So, third prize goes to Peter. Second prize goes to David Kilian. And first prize goes to somebody who was also last year here in the conference. Congratulations. If you want to say a few words. You've already had your speech, you don't have to. Okay, then just take your time.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit, I want to really thank my teacher. We didn't really get enough help from our school, from our district and everything, but the only one who was always there for me, helping me, taking us with her car to competitions because we couldn't go otherwise, was our teacher and the only one, Mrs. Vulpe. And I really want to thank you. You're the only one who helped me, and this is yours as well.
Thank you for that. Well, so I would also like to invite everybody to take a group photo. Okay. So first we'll just take one with the participants, and then we'll have the educators as well.
And now